Welcome, everybody, and to our evincing opportunity in devastation. And as usual, Ed is here with stories and anecdotes, with learning points to inspire. And Ed, over to you.
Last week we talked about a lot of things about moving out of the buyer's market and into the seller's market, about how you could do that more intelligently. And one of the things that we touched on things like pricing and some other issues. And one of the things we touched on was needs, and we said it needs, pun not intended, a bit of a deeper explanation than that, because this is a complex subject. And we hear the phrase selling to needs and needs based selling and solution selling. We hear those phrases bandied about all the time. But what does it actually mean? Let's just ask ourselves, if someone who wanted to sell something to me, let us say a new laptop, if they or a new cell phone, if they came to me and said to me, Ed, tell me, what are your needs in a laptop? I would tell them on the surface, I need this and this and this and this. Would I tell them my need is for a laptop that could fit into a budget which is at the moment extremely tight, so I really don't want to buy a laptop? Probably not. It would make me look very vulnerable. Would I tell them that I want the top of the range laptop because I've just received a large amount of money and I want to splurge? Probably not, because then I would pay through my nose for the laptop and I wouldn't be able to bargain because I would have disclosed my hand. And when you say my needs, you're really talking a lot about your vulnerabilities. And if it's a business rather than an individual, then that vulnerability is very, very high. So unless you have a long and trusting relationship with the supplier, are you really going to open up to all of the vulnerabilities in your business? Are you going to tell them what is wrong with your business and um, why you should have a particular solution? Because once you tell him what's wrong with your business, then you put the control into the seller's hands. And we don't like doing that, especially entrepreneurs. We like to control everything, the world if we could. We like control. We like taking charge of what's happening in life, in our businesses especially. And so often I get these superficial approaches, and someone has been probably poorly taught needs based selling, and they approach me and say, what do you need in a bank? And I say, I need to be able to trust you guys. And they say, oh, we're very trustworthy. Okay, that needs solved. No, it isn't. No, it isn't by a very, very long chalk. It is, I haven't disclosed a need at all. I have just given you the surface. And people base on that and they say they're doing needs based selling, but in fact, what they're doing is pushing their product, which is the old style of selling that I got taught back in the days when steam trains ran and telephones were actually messages in cleft stick. It's a long, long time ago that I got taught that methodology, and people are still bizarrely teaching it. And many salespeople, that's the only training they've ever had. We need to do better than that, and that's true at an organizational level as well. At our organization, we need to understand the needs of the market. And again, I hear so many times among entrepreneurs, no, I understand perfectly what people need. That's why I'm building this thing. And when you ask when last the design of that thing changed, it was about 5 years ago. We've upgraded it a little bit here and there, just to make it cheaper and to give it a few more features. Makes it easier to sell it. Have you re-examined the needs of the market over the last 5 years? Probably not. And yet, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had the most devastating change that has happened in our world in decades, perhaps hundreds of years. It's been a worldwide set of changes which are cataclysmic in many areas. And you really think that needs haven't changed over that period? Almost certainly, economic needs have changed. People have a need to show economies because they are fighting both competition and reduced markets. Have you catered for that? Question mark. So the superficial need is, perhaps even more dangerous than just going out and trying to flog your product because you believe that you're doing something, but you're not achieving it. Zig Ziglar, that absolute master of the pithy statement with regard to sales, and he was talking about salespeople here, but I extend that to entrepreneurs as well, to businesses, because the rule still applies. And he said that every sale has five barriers. And those five barriers are no money, no hurry, no need, no desire, and no trust. And if any one of those five barriers is not met, um, it does not have a tick against it that yes, they have money, yes, they're in a hurry, yes, they have a need, yes, they want to, and yes, they trust you. If any one of those remains unticked, you will not sell. That's a very, very profound university of selling in a very short paragraph. And that element of trust comes up over and over again. How do you get people to trust you, especially if you're looking for new business? If you've been dealing with a company for many, many years, probably there is at least some level of trust there. Maybe you want to deepen that, and you can only do that in conversation. Or if you are in a market and there's a level of trust in the market, you've got a reputation, you've got a brand in that market for providing a solution. Maybe again, you should not be too arrogant, but pay attention to the market and um, and keep probing and finding out what their real needs are and how they are changing. You might even have to use a market researcher to do that. And market researchers are very expensive, so people shy away from them. But the most expensive thing in any business is the sales that you could have made but didn't make because you were somehow deficient in your marketing or strategy or sales processes. The most expensive thing you can do in business is to lose sales, some of which you don't even know that you could have got. That cost, if it were quantified and you got an invoice for it, would scare everyone witless because there are many things that you could have got but didn't get because something was wrong. Something in how you'd set up, or something in how you marketed it, or something in how you sold it, or something in terms of the product or the price or any other factor. Sales, you didn't get what you could have. Most expensive thing. Compared to that, a bit of heavy expenditure on market research is probably trivial. And if that ups your game considerably in your trust market, well, great. And it would give you trust where you can go back and say, this is the results to all the participants. They love that. If you're looking for new business, how do you establish trust? You're going into a new market or a potential new customer. How on earth do you get them to trust you? How can you ensure that they say, yeah, this is pretty good, and I'm happy to open the toga a little bit and show you some of my weaknesses in my business or in this market, and see what sort of solutions you can come up with. That is more difficult. Probably the ways to do that is to be deeply immersed in that. Join associations, talk to groups in social media organizations like, or social media in like LinkedIn, for instance, which is great for business to business. Get involved with discussion on that. Talk to journalists who write about that particular type of industry. Get more detail so that you have knowledge. So when you do talk in the industry, either directly on a one to one, or when you talk to the industry in terms of advertising or social media posts or blog posts or direct mail or whatever media you're using, that you have an authority level, that you understand what's happening there. That will help to engender trust. The other thing you can do is get other people to say, this person is trustworthy. And you do that by means of endorsements from existing customers or from people you've done business with in the past. And and in many environments, a simple thing like a star rating, a rating from people who have dealt with you and who are prepared to rate your business, can be quite a valuable one. If they're all rating you 5 stars and or 4 stars or 4.5 stars, and no one's giving you bad reviews, then it's likely, and they're identifying themselves, then it's likely that you probably have some level of trustworthiness. And once you have some level of trustworthiness, you can probably look for more confidence from your potential client or from your potential market in opening up to tell you their vulnerabilities. Asking someone to tell you their vulnerability is a big ask, especially if you're an unknown. Be conscious of that and approach it sensibly. And then I want to touch on Ziegler said it. He said their needs and their desires, and those two are very different. And you could add wants into that as well, and say wants and needs and desires. Should we be talking to people who have a need, or should we be talking to people who have a desire for something? Ziegler suggests that in fact we need both, that if we've identified what the wants are in a business, if we have identified, sorry, what the needs are in a business, do they really want to address those needs, or are they're getting sort of comfortable with it? Like you deal with, something which is not great, but we won't kick up too much of a fuss. We'll just carry on with that. A grudge purchase, for instance, a lot of insurance purchase or things like that fall into those categories. And yeah, it's not great, but we don't want to do anything about it. We don't desire to do anything about it. So we have a need. We would like to get more affordable, easier to claim from insurance, for instance, but we probably don't have the desire to change things because we don't want to rock the boat. We have a need to reduce costs. Do we have the desire to reduce costs? Do we have the desire to retrench people or change suppliers from suppliers we've been dealing with for perhaps dozens of years? Might have the need, but we don't have the desire to do that. And again, it depends in your market. If you're involved in luxury goods, then very much we're talking about wants rather than needs, or we'd certainly be talking about desires. So I want a top of the line sports car. Do I need it? No. Do I desire it? Very much so. Will I ever get that right now? No, because it falls through one of the other cracks. There's I don't have enough money, and it would be stupid to spend that sort of money on that kind of commodity right now. But it doesn't stop me lusting after a top end sports car, and doesn't stop me lusting after, an island holiday or a whole lot of other things. So if you're in the business of luxury items, then a lot of the time you spend looking at wants and desires rather than needs. Quite frankly, in practical terms, who actually does need a top of the line, very fast sports car, especially with things like speed limits and potholes and other little details like that. So be very careful about what your market works on. If it's an industrial type market, you're probably looking more at the needs side of things, at, at what they have to improve their processes, and what they really uh, um, will buy, almost irrespective of whether it's a grudge purchase or not. They might not want to buy it, but they will have to buy it. So, take lubricants, for example. If they could do without them, well, that would be great, save a lot of money. But they can't, so they will buy lubricants. They might then choose to buy the lowest quality, the lowest priced lubricants. You will have to guard against that. So, separation between those three, need, want, desire, is quite important to think about for you as an entrepreneur. Now, we've talked about the difficulty of getting to the real need of the person. How do you actually go about doing that? Either on a global scale in a market, or, and that's probably easier, or on a one on one basis, especially when the people don't know you well. This is probably a case for CEO to CEO type discussion. And even if it's in a market, you might want to have discussions with several or even many CEOs in that market and have an open discussion. You have to be able to go in knowing at least a lot about that market. So you have to do your homework first. So you have to go in and be able to say, I understand that this kind of thing and this kind of thing and this kind of thing is affecting your well-being in this market. To what degree does it affect you? What other factors are there? And so long as you treat this respectfully and you are knowledgeable and you don't try and sell, this is just information gathering, and you give them some incentive to give you that information. Like, if we then put something special together, you will be one of, and you've contributed towards that, you will be one of the first who will have access to that, or to a beta test version of it, or something like that. There is very little substitute for direct, face to face, informal discussion, especially at a senior management level. A lot of CEOs that I meet say, I don't have time for that stuff. I'm busy. And yes, they probably are. They're working 12 hours a day. And they don't have time to go out and do these things. And my only answer to that is examine why you're working 12 hours a day. Are you really doing things that subordinates could do, but that you're holding on to because you're very good at doing that? Um, and you're jealous of other people learning that high priced skill that you own? Um, there's always time for the most important. We're looking at priority here. We're looking at what's important rather than what is urgent. And it's a big distinguishing factor. So if you can spend time talking CEO to CEO, they will often produce quite a lot of results. If you can't spend time talking to CEO, or if that doesn't produce the results, you have to use your eyes. And your sales team should be trained to observe, to be able to see what's happening in the organization, to ask casual questions like the number of returns they get and what they do when something goes wrong and they have to get it back again, and issues like that. That will usually give you all the clues that you need to be able to apply your product range towards that, and or modify your product range or services towards that, or supplement them. And then keep doing that, because that's not a static activity. So there's some ideas on a very short discussion of what really is a very, very extended kind of think tank discussion on what really needs are, what needs-based selling is or should be, and and how you can achieve needs-based selling. Remember, the book Solution Selling was written in 1993. It's nearly 30 years ago. It's ancient. We should be doing better than we're doing at the moment, and we can. And I do know that if you really get into needs based selling, then selling becomes easy and your growth becomes very, very easy. Hope that helps people.
I'm sure it really does. And I mean, just something by way of closing off the session is just to say, as I was listening, What strikes me in one key aspect to needs-based selling is your ability as the company or the salesperson to really listen. And here we're not talking about subjective listening when it's all about your own agenda and trying to match your product spec to or features or whatever to what you think, or your service, or what you think the target prospect requires. But and that often, as Ed was talking about, leads to superficial needs. So listening skills. And also, Ed, you also at the end here spoke about, if when you're doing your research and you can't do the CEO to CEO conversations, observe. What are your eyes telling you? What are you noticing? So it's interesting that we close off this session with me just highlighting: use your ears, apply your eyes, put it together, and position your product best to meet what the client actually needs. And I love the summary there of The Barriers to Sale by Zig Ziglar. What are the issues? Why are people not buying? No money. There's no hurry. There is no need. There is no desire. And then there's no trust. So very, very powerful things. And I know unpacking each one of these even further would be really beneficial. But yes, thank you very much. I mean, thank you for those of you that have been listening as well. And to our listeners who's listening to the recording, understand what's happening currently. And as Ed was saying, solutions selling, written in 1993. As far back as that, there's a core to that. There's a core truth that when we apply it, we will see the results. So test, taste, and see. And we don't even mind you getting in touch with us, telling us that you have tried and you share the results with us, and so that we can, by at the same time, share it with the rest of the listeners. And until next week then.